Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today we're going to talk about loot crates in video games and whether or not they should be considered gambling. If they are considered gambling, this will have pretty big implications on the design limitations for video games in most countries. Now, of course, this discussion stems from the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot crate system, but it has implications far beyond just this game. And ironically, the huge fiasco or the big publicity or media hype about the loot crate system was actually tied into progression and giving players an advantage in exchange for money, which really doesn't have anything to do with the loot crate gambling concept overall. Gamers, for the most part, were just upset about the progression and monetary advantage system, not so much the gambling system, but the gambling concept has really piqued a lot of politicians and countries that are looking at problematic practices within the video game world, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now, right around the time that the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot crate fiasco was hitting critical mass and every news channel and news site was talking about it, that's when a bunch of countries and politicians announced that they were going to start looking into the legislation and the laws behind whether or not loot crate systems in video games were a form of gambling, which would then imply that they should be illegal. So games using loot crate systems in which you could buy into would either have to change or become illegal within that given country. Or if it's in the US, certain states could make this practice illegal while other states would still allow it to be legal if it didn't go to the federal level. This would have huge ramifications on the current gaming market. Think about some of the most popular games in the world right now. We have FIFA that uses the trading card system, obviously Star Wars Battlefront 2, but then we've got Blizzard games like Overwatch and Hearthstone, both of which use card pack or loot crate systems that you can exchange money for. Counter-Strike Go uses loot boxes that you can purchase with money. There are plenty of games using this system right now, thousands really. If you start delving into the mobile market, it's absolutely insane. So if legislation was passed that made paying for loot crates in online gaming illegal, it would mean that thousands of games would have to change the way that they're built or just become illegal in whatever country determined that loot crates were not appropriate. And you better believe that game developers are taking these issues seriously as well. Having spoken to some people I know in the gaming industry, their companies are already looking at backup monetization plans for their games that use loot crate systems. They kind of have to be, because if a law goes into effect that completely changes the legality of their game, they're not necessarily going to want to just pull out of a certain gaming market, especially if that gaming market is Europe or the US. That would be absolute murder to their sales and their income. So they have to come up with alternative monetization practices, and doing so now rather than later makes a hell of a lot of sense. So you better believe that just about every AAA company out there using loot crate systems are coming up with backup plans and a way to implement something really quickly if any of these laws come into effect. And what's interesting to me is there's really multiple stages of the severity of the loot crate gambling system, or the styles in which it's implemented. Take Counter-Strike Go. The skin gambling websites that have built up around that game have become multi-million-dollar industries. People are addicted to buying skins, gambling skins, and cashing those skins out for money. The reason why these sites still exist for the most part is that they use a middleman system that gets around the whole definition of gambling, since gambling has a very simplistic and unevolved description of saying you basically need to exchange money for the chance to win more money. Which makes no sense at all to me, considering you go into a casino, you exchange your actual money for chips, which have no real world value, and then when you leave the casino, you then exchange your chips that you used to gamble with for money. It's the exact same thing that people are doing with Counter-Strike Go skin gambling, yet skin gambling is just abstract enough so that lawmakers can't quite understand how it's the exact same thing. That thing to me kind of like blows my mind that we haven't updated our legislation around that process yet. What doesn't surprise me though, and the much more interesting discussion, is whether or not the practice of buying a crate in a game that can then not be exchanged for money afterwards constitutes a form of gambling. This is precisely what Belgium and Hawaii are looking at right now. They're trying to change the legislation on this to make it so that you don't necessarily have to win money from something in order for it to be considered gambling. I think for the most part, especially since legislators and politicians are generally older in age, have a hard time of understanding the fact that digital items or things in-game can have the same value or even more value than physically tangible items, things that you could buy in a store. Gamers these days, myself included, put a huge amount of value behind items earned within a game. That's why people really like progression systems in video games, systems that reward you with new cosmetics or cool ways to individualize your character that also show off how much you've played the game or how good you are at the game. These have been highly successful in games for a long time, and tying that into a loot crate system means that people are going to be inclined to spend real-world money for in-game cosmetics, things that will not exist when you are not playing the video game. The problem, of course, is that the gaming industry has found the loot crate system to be one of the most effective and most addicting systems to have ever been implemented in microtransactions. It's why most game developers are following the same format and trying to implement random chance systems to get players hooked into just buying one or two more crates on the off chance that you might get that special item you're looking for. Now, addictive mechanics and practices have been in video gaming for a long time. It's pretty much impossible to regulate or tell developers to make their games less addictive. The problem, of course, or the area where things become more problematic is when you tie those addictive practices directly into a monetary system, where people who suffer from gambling addiction can easily be exploited into spending a lot of their money on these practices. And it's come to show that a lot of people who are spending the huge amounts of money, $10,000 to $15,000 over the course of a year or two on in-game cosmetic items, are people who suffer from gambling addiction problems. The gaming industry would like you to think that the people spending this kind of money are Saudi princes or Bill Gates-like gamers who just have a huge amount of disposable income and 10 grand to them is absolutely nothing. But the truth of the matter is that it's usually people with medium income or a lower class income who are spending just about every spare dime that they have on these in-game microtransactions. And some people might say, well, you know what, that's their choice. They can do with their money what they want to. The problem with that mentality, of course, is that there's a very fuzzy line between saying people can spend their money on addictive practices if they want to, and saying people can spend their money on hardcore drug abuse if they want to. I mean, we're flawed. People and humanity are flawed beings. We have addictive tendencies. We have predatory instincts to try and take advantage of other people. It's why we have a legal system to try and prevent and regulate these processes as best as possible. Refining the system and evolving the system to better incorporate new technology and new social practices is something that is often necessary. And I think we're sort of at that time in the gaming industry where we need to sort of readjust and relook at some of the addictive practices that have become quite popular. Now, I saw an interesting counter argument where somebody said, look, if you're going to make loot crates in-game illegal, especially ones that can't be exchanged for money but are just there for cosmetic or in-game upgrades, then you may as well make the practice of buying Kinder Surprise eggs illegal. Those little Kinder eggs where kids buy them and they get a random toy on the inside, and it's sort of this random chance mentality of like, oh, it's really fun to see what kind of toy you're going to get. Nobody knows, and kids love them. Here's the thing about those eggs. Well, for one, they're regulated by their parents, essentially. The market is aimed at very, very young kids who don't have their own money or probably shouldn't have their own money. And basically, mom and dad are 100% in charge of how many eggs these kids can get. The other thing is that the online video addiction of watching people open these Kinder eggs is absolutely insane. Some of the most viewed videos on YouTube right now are just people opening 80 Kinder eggs or tons of these little Kinder eggs. So basically, kids have developed an actual addiction to just watching Kinder egg unboxing videos. So think about that for a second. If the concept of unboxing random chance items, whether it's an in-game item, a slot machine at a casino, or a Kinder egg, they all have the same kind of addictive properties behind them. And whether you're a kid, a teenage gamer, or an adult that is gambling in a casino, you're just as vulnerable to your addictive vices as just about anyone else. I think there's just a large segment of society who doesn't have addictive tendencies and can easily brush this off as people making stupid decisions, completely overlooking the fact that many businesses have incredibly predatory-like business models that will employ whatever tactics they can to make as much money as possible, regardless of the outcome or the effect it has on its users. Anyway, for the time being, random chance loot crates that you have to pay money for in video games are not considered gambling in most countries. Yet. And they're not illegal yet. But I have a feeling we're going to be in for a fairly big change in the way that microtransactions work in the gaming industry in the near future. If you guys watch this video all the way through, I think you have a pretty good idea of what side of the argument I'm on, but I'd still love to hear your ideas in the comments below. I really do want to know what you guys think about monetizable loot crates in video games, even if you can't sell the items afterwards. Should that be considered gambling, or should it be made illegal in any way, or are you totally okay with it? As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.